Hello, everybody. My name's Paul Ford, and I run the Centerfield Insurance Division, formerly Datalot. And we spend a lot of time looking after large insurance companies and protecting their brand by helping them with search engine marketing and lowering their costs. And in the process of seeing a lot of tech, MarTech, InsurTech, I bumped into this guy. And you guys made a really good choice being here today, because this is going to be the best session at Medicarians. So without further ado, the guy who invented Siri, Dag, tell us how the story got started.
Good morning. I guess a lot of people don't know that Siri actually wasn't an Apple-born product. It was actually born out of a research company called Stanford Research Institute, and I kind of left my last job after I was working at Motorola for 5 years. I went and moved to California and moved my wife and kids and everybody out there. And the minute the plane landed, I had a young child that came out a little bit early and had to have surgery, and ended up spending my time between the NICU and going over to Sand Hill Road looking for funding for this new company that was a technology that came out of Stanford Research Institute. So actually, Siri was a startup that was founded in 2007, and basically a technology that was about talking to computers and turning a new paradigm. Originally, if you think about search engine at the time, Google was kind of all the rage, and that was about keywords and entering a word and coming back with search engine results. And Siri was really about conversation and tasks and getting things done by talking to a computer. And that's kind of where originally Siri came from.
I gotta ask, where did the name come from? Because it's a pretty cool name.
Yeah. So Siri actually is a Norwegian name, and Steve Jobs and I argued for 18 months about the name because he wanted to change it. He wanted to call it Apple Talk. And of course, having a bunch of startup guys come in and want to have this thing be more like a persona, we kind of ignored him. And he's not used to that. Steve isn't used to being ignored.
Apple Talk.
Yeah, exactly. So Siri actually means beautiful woman that leads you to victory in Norwegian. And it was kind of a cool name, and we kind of stuck with our guns. And he eventually, in the last moment, kind of said, okay, I really don't have something better than that, so we're going to stick with it. So we were really excited about that in the end. But
I know when you guys were originally doing the coding, and before you handed it all over to Apple, you hid a couple of things, a couple of Easter eggs in the code. Can you give us a couple of examples and tell us how long it took them to find them?
I can tell you some of them, but they're not. Some of them aren't safe for work, so I'm going to hold back on some of that. In the early days, so an Easter egg, for those of you that don't know, means basically the programmers put in some interesting questions in there that nobody thinks anyone's ever going to find. We don't tell anybody about them. We just kind of come back later and say, hey, you can ask Siri to do this. One of them was, interestingly, and I don't know where this came up, but where can I bury a dead body? No one will ever find that one, right? Now, bear in mind that within 24 hours of the Siri launch, I was sitting in a hotel room, and Jay Leno, out of nowhere, does a 10-minute thing on the Tonight Show about Siri, and somebody started instantly, and I mean within the first 24 hours, a website that's called shitsirisays.com. And they discovered everything, every little Easter egg, every secret that we put in there, they had started, putting down on this website. But one of them was, where do I bury a dead body? We thought, of course, nobody will ever ask that. That'll be kind of just a kind of little funny thing. Of course, within 3 years, 2-3 years of launching Siri, somebody actually killed their roommate and asked Siri where they should bury the body. This is a true story. Luckily, Siri then, of course, would say, where's the nearest swamp or metal foundry, whatever. Where do you want to bury it?
Odd.
So,
I don't know if I want to know the answer to this one, actually.
well, this person actually asked Siri where they should put the body, and ultimately the authorities tracked this person down by going step by step and found the body. It was crazy. When you're dealing with a product that has 1 billion users, the stories that you get are pretty unbelievable. But
so you said you had to argue with, and sorry about my voice, I've been cheering for the Colorado Avalanche a lot, so it's, I knew that was going to generate some reactions. You said negotiating with Steve was a process. Ultimately, you were able to keep the name. What's it like? You're, a young guy walking into one of the most successful entrepreneurs to ever live. What was the process like?
First of all, I would say that I didn't have the usual startup experience as a CEO. Siri was my first company. We launched it as an app in the App Store, which a lot of people don't know, that it was literally just, you could download this kind of crazy app called Siri on the App Store before Apple got involved. I was going out to lunch one day, and my biz dev guy came up and said, hey, someone from Apple's trying to reach you. Can I give you their number? And I said, sure. And I don't know if you guys remember, but like 10 years ago, every once in a while, someone would call on the iPhone, and like your phone would ring, and you would swipe it, and it would keep bouncing back. Does anyone ever remember that from the old days? And I could see that it was from Cupertino. And I'm like, okay, someone from Apple's calling, but I just would not answer the phone. On like the 7th try, finally I picked up and I said, hello, and the guy said, is this Dag? And I said, yeah, this is Dag. He said, well, this is Steve Jobs. And I'm looking at the guy next to me, and I'm like, Steve Jobs? He's like, no way. And long story short, he called me out of the blue, and he said, look, we love what you're doing. Long story short, can you come over to my house tomorrow? And I'd love to talk to you about it. And I'm like, sorry, but I have to take my wife to the ballet tomorrow. I actually said that. He's like, oh, that's great. Let me call you back. Let's find another time. I said, wonderful. Of course, thinking that, an admin would call me back and say, Mr. Jobs is available. And no, but lo and behold, half an hour later, he called me back and said, how about 1:30? And so basically, we just went over to his house, myself and my 2 founders, and we just really literally kicked off our shoes and put our feet up on his coffee table in front of a roaring fire and talked about...
So the whole walking around barefoot thing is legit?
Yeah, it is. When you're in his house, it's legit. So he's, looking at these original Ansel Adams pictures on the wall, and he basically called his argument was why iPhone was going to win the smartphone wars and why Siri should be a part of it. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Steve, originally, when he was like back in the Macintosh days, he brought in a CEO from Pepsi, and he said to him, and he gave me kind of a similar line, which was, to the Pepsi guy, he said, well, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world with me? And that, he kind of gave me a version of that, which was essentially, do you want to nickel and dime your way to this, or should we really go big? And we had just raised a lot of money and weren't really ready to sell, and our board wasn't, excited about selling the company at that time, but he called me 34 days in a row. Starts calling me at midnight. I'm like, what do you want to get, what do you want to get this time? So it was kind of a crazy story, but kind of a crazy guy. And we had some crazy experiences during the negotiation, and Yeah.
So now Apple owns the technology, is wrapping resources around it, and they're busy, sort of working with that. And you have to sort of look at it and go, well, are you happy with what they did with it? Because you guys stuck around for 2-3 years. You were part of the team. And it is what it is today, but there's other virtual assistants out there. Are you pleased with where it is right now?
Let me start with the fact that the benefit of getting acquired by a company like Apple at the heyday of their influence and their power and their financial strength was that he basically gave me a blank check. And that was part of his argument to me was, we're going to take this little thing that you're doing and make it into a really big thing. So the finance guys would come in and said, okay, Steve said, give you what you need. I'm going to give you whatever you want, and you guys build it out. And great. Any good entrepreneur wants that kind of responsibility. I know it's early. I'm going to tell you, in straight language, how he communicated with me. He said, I'm going to give you everything you need to make this work, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to fucking kill you. Pardon my French.
Jay's got people in the audio region right now working on that little clip.
He literally said that to me, and I would ask if anybody care to guess how much money we spent building Siri in the 18 months from the time it was acquired to getting ready for 100 million users. How much money did that cost to get that ready? Any guesses? What was it? 200 million? 5 million? So, what was it? Billion. Yes, 1 billion. So I spent $1 billion as a startup founder in Apple with the finance guys every week asking me, what do you need? I need this, 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 and this. I was signing off on like $50 million a week getting ready for this because we had to acquire companies, we had to build a 1 million square foot data center, all this. Next question is, how long after the iPhone 4S, if you guys remember the first launch of an iPhone where they used the word, the S, that stood for Siri. And anyone want to guess how long after that launch we made that $1 billion back in profit? 11 days? 6 months? 24 hours. It was literally, now if you guys remember, thank you. If you guys remember, at the end of a lot of Apple presentations, Steve would always go, oh, one more thing. You guys remember that? Anybody? That was kind of his kind of words for, we have one more really big thing to do. And of course, we were working very hard to make Siri that one more thing. And it turned out that was for the iPhone 4S. That was the big thing. And launching something like this with a company like Apple was, gives it a stage and really creates a new paradigm as it's done. And of course, subsequently, Alexa comes out and Google Assistant comes out. Everybody was copying and throwing billions of dollars in this, out of nowhere.
Which brings up an interesting point, because a lot of people in the room probably don't realize that you also invented a lesser known assistant, which then through a company called Viv that went on to become Bixby and is now the voice assistant for Samsung.
Yeah, so my second company was called Viv. It was acquired by Samsung.
Where'd you get the idea?
Well, the difference between Siri and Viv was that we knew that Siri was a cool idea, but Apple exclusively, to this day, figures out what Siri can and can't do. My second company was about saying, okay, if you want to take this assistant idea and take it to the next level, what needs to happen? And what needs to happen was we need to open up an app store for artificial intelligence. In the same way, if you guys remember, 2007, the iPhone came out, but it only came out with apps that were made by Apple. Now, this is a very short period, but you guys remember the weather, stocks, you know, the original iPhone only had apps that Apple came up with. But that next year, they came out with the App Store, which then suddenly changed the world, because suddenly you have 1 million different apps that, in ways that people would use their phone to do all these different things and sort of unlock this creativity. So that was what the next idea was with this assistant paradigm, was build an app store for artificial intelligence. And that's what we did. Samsung bought it. They have a sort of their version of Siri that's now called Bixby. Terrible name. Didn't agree with it at all. But yeah, they have roughly about 500 million users on that now, and Siri is about 1.2 billion. So anyway, between the two of them, we're approaching 2 billion people that use it on a monthly basis, which is kind of fun.
So Samsung bought your second company in 2016, and I had the unique experience of actually being with you a week later when you dropped a bomb on me.
Yeah, a bomb that wasn't really original to you, which was within a week of selling this company to Samsung, my wife kind of out of the blue said, "When's the last time you had a doctor appointment?" I said, "I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years." She said, "Well, I signed you up for this executive health exam." I said, "Great, let's go." We had just done our 4th straight Olympic triathlon. We're in great shape. And just went into doctor appointment like any other doctor appointment I've been in my life. Found out subsequently that I was in really good health, except for that large lemon-sized tumor on my pancreas, which was a shocking, crazy moment. And interestingly enough, I had pancreatic cancer, and I had the exact same kind that killed Steve. And I met with him every week, right up until the time that he died, and ended up leaving the company after he died within a few days. But shockingly had this diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, which was a shock to say the least, and the exact same thing that killed him. So I watched him over the period of 18 months sort of wither away, and you know, he was probably, in the last meeting that I had with him, he was probably 130 pounds, and literally having somebody carry him into the room, and he was eating this cake the whole time. So yeah, I ended up getting the same diagnosis, and it scared me greatly. But it also, going through that, I subsequently, within 24 hours, I had that resected, which is a big surgery. Steve didn't do that. He waited 10 months. I don't know if you guys know this story or not, but he couldn't stand the thought of having somebody cut into him. He's had like a lot of Eastern philosophy and sort of, but wasn't really into kind of modern medicine. So he couldn't stand that thought, and ultimately it spread to his liver, and we all saw what happened after that. So I was determined not to have that happen, and it got me down a path in healthcare.
And I remember you, we were sitting around one night talking, and you said, I know what my next company is going to be. And the fact of the matter is you had no idea. But you knew it was going to be in healthcare, and you knew it was going to involve big data. And you started down a journey, and then a few years later, you really have figured out what you're doing next. So tell us a little bit about Riva.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time kind of looking into healthcare, and I was very new to the business, and healthcare isn't an easy place to enact change. And I spent literally the entire summer of when COVID hit originally, and everybody's in their house and locked up. I was on my computer, 20 hours a day, just researching all the different possible things we could do. But I didn't have the one thing that I really like to have when I start a new company, which is a breakthrough technology that changes the game. And I happened to have lunch with a guy subsequently later that summer. Everybody's masked up. You're still in the middle of a pandemic. But he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Look, I'm really looking for a healthcare idea, but I don't have a tech. I'm really exploring that." And he said, "I have a guy. You really need to meet this guy." His name was Tuit Sinha, an Indian guy who'd been really working on this thing in his garage, like a lot of startups. You guys hear the metaphors about starting in a garage. He really started this in his garage. Indian guy who's 40 years old, and I had a first call with him, and he said, "Look, my dad has 6 siblings, and my father and all 6 siblings died from heart disease and heart attacks, every single one of them prior to the age of 60. And I was like, whoa. So he invented essentially a way to use your mobile device to measure high blood pressure. And that is what our new company is. It's called Riva. I don't know if we have it up on the screen or not.
Yeah, walk us through it a little bit. Dag, explain some of the tech and how this works, because the idea of telemedicine is an amazing idea. Right now it works for psychiatric care because the doctor can talk to you and ask questions over the phone. But it's really challenging to do physical care because you don't have any of the vitals.
Right.
And so if all of a sudden you can start to collect vitals on your cell phone, things get really, really interesting in the medical space.
Yeah.
So talk us through this.
So the idea of taking your phone, turning on I can demonstrate it, but in essence, you can take your phone, light up basically the flashlight in the back of it. You put your finger over the camera on the back, and it essentially lights up the vasculature in your finger, and it's watching this every time your heart beats. There's something called a blood pulse waveform, which is kind of a phenomenon created by your heart as it's going through the vascular tree. So you're essentially just using your phone to measure blood pressure. Now, we had this conversation and we talked, and I said, that's kind of cool. It's really interesting, and it's a neat thing. Do we have it? We can put it on the screen. Great. So you kind of stick your finger up on this back of the phone. It's reading this every time your heart beats. It's reading your blood pressure. Very neat. Okay, I got off the first call with my potential co-founder. Said, that's really neat. Very interesting. I think I called it nifty. But it took me until within a couple days we had a second call. I said, tell me about why this matters. What is important about this? Ultimately, this phone call lasted so long that I had to plug in my phone. I was running out of battery. I think we had talked for 7 straight hours about this, but the reality is that high blood pressure is the #1 health issue in the world. It's a silent killer. Nobody really cares. People have it, but they still use 130-year-old technology. They're using stethoscopes, blood pressure cuffs, and if you see the name of this company called Riva, it's named after the guy who invented the cuff. Schippone Riva Roche was the Italian guy's name in the 1800s. And he basically said, look, if we can make it this easy to change the way people manage this disease, of which 50% of all adult Americans have, many of them don't even know it, we can really make a dent. And it just hit me in that phone call, the importance of this.
The ease of taking the blood pressure, but then the frequency, and then all the data that comes from that is a big part of it.
So this is This is the #1 health issue in the world, and there is no data. Why? We're bringing it for the first time to this equation because, I mean, you guys all go to the doctor's office maybe once a year, get your checkup, get your blood pressure taken, and they roll their chair over and they manually enter it into the electronic health record. But if you put this on your phone, make it a 20-second measurement that you can just use, 90% of every American has a mobile phone. 80% of every adult worldwide has a phone. I mean, people have phones that can't afford shoes. So we're going to bring this to the world in a way that just makes it so much easier, so much more accessible, and as a result, you save a ton of heart attacks, strokes, and you're bringing data to a problem that's never had it before. So every time we take a reading, and you guys are going to be able to download this soon. We're like in the midst of filing with FDA. It's a regulated thing. But we know we have the data. We know it works very well. But you have data. Like most people that use this, because it's so easy, will take measurements 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And we have heart rate variation, blood pressure. We're going to add pulse ox, and ultimately some other things. So
it's the changes in the data that get identified when they're stored that give you the information.
Yeah, this is a problem that has no data behind it. So there's no, if you're an African American woman that has a blood pressure of this, you have this genetic profile, there's no place to go to say, where's the best place to start with meds? So med titration and figuring out the right dosages, that is just an ad hoc thing today that doctors do just manually. So there doesn't exist any real rubric on how to do this. There's something called JNC8 for those of you that are in the business. That is built on just literally 100-year-old processes for fixing this problem. So we think taking this, bringing it to the mobile device that everyone has, making it very easy, is going to change forever and make inevitable that people will use their phone for managing something like hypertension, and I believe other large population things like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and others will be managed from the mobile device in the future. So that's the big trend.
I noticed you guys came up with a great slogan for this thing.
Oh yeah, let's see if I have it here. All right, so we're gonna prescribe for the first time. Doctors will prescribe an app instead of prescribing a med for this type of disease. It's not just a number, and yes, so we have this technology. I'm gonna get through this in about the next 10 seconds. But yes, we have a slogan. And of course, once you start measuring, you wanna make sure that you keep people engaged. So you use social dynamics. There's a lot of incentives that people use, find out if they're having symptom burden, so on and so forth. But with measurement, with data, we've kind of come up with a slogan about how we're gonna call this. And yes, we have a bunch of fantastic data. Sorry guys, I'm like running behind on my slides because I only have a few seconds here, but we have very good evidence that using your device to do this really helps, and this is kind of how we end up calling. Give heart disease the finger.
He couldn't bury an Easter egg in this one, so he just decided to throw it right out on the slogan. Dag and I are both going to be around after this. If you're a Medicare insurance company and you want to learn more about protecting your brand, I'll be around outside these doors afterwards. If you're a Medicare insurance company and you want to figure out how to lower the cost of delivering care for the largest health issue in the world today, this guy will be available outside that door as well. They got to take some mics off. But thank you guys for being here. It's awesome.
Thank you.